Hello, this is Mike Porter with Print Mail Consultants with some more document operations tips for mailing systems technologies. Today I thought we'd talk about mailing piece integrity. Now this is quite a broad subject, certainly bigger than what we'll have time for here. But we'll hit some high spots and we'll give you some things to think about and some things to check into later. I'll talk about the importance of mail piece integrity and why I think it's going to be even more important going forward. And we'll touch on some methods that you can use to improve integrity, from some basic manual methods on up to some more complex and advanced ways that you can go about it. Some of this material is included in the book Take This Job and Stuff It, a practical guide for document operations managers. This is a great resource, especially if you're new to personalized documents like statements and bills. Matter of fact, we wrote it specifically for that audience. The book can be found right here on the bookstore at Mailing Systems Technologies, so check it out. Well, I guess we should start with a definition of exactly what mail piece integrity means. For today's discussion, we're going to consider two aspects. The first aspect is of being able to account for every single mail piece. Did it get printed, finished, and mailed, or did it get hung up somewhere along in the workflow? Now, it's not unusual for the finished piece counts to be different from the original data file record counts. There's lots of things that can happen along the way, including damage and crunched statements, things that happen at different processing steps. Or there may be some records that don't get printed at all due to conditions in the data, things like zero balance statements or accounts that have invalid addresses. Or there may be some other records that get printed at different times or at different places from the rest of the batch. Some examples here might be high-value customer statements accounts that get printed on full-color printers instead of the monochrome printers, or high page counts statements, and those get printed separately so they don't get mixed in with the folded mail. So you can see that just simply balancing from the beginning to the end isn't always a real easy thing to do, but it's really essential, especially if you're doing statements or insurance EOBs or things like that. If you can't achieve at least this level of reconciliation, there's no way you should be sending the mail out the door. Now, the second aspect of mail piece integrity that we're going to talk about has to do with the makeup of the mail piece itself. Was it printed on the right stock? Are all the pages there? What about variable inserts? Does each envelope have the right stuffers? And did the correct outbound and return envelopes get loaded onto the inserting machines? All those things contribute to mail piece integrity too. Now, most of my career was spent doing items like checks and EOBs and statements and bills, things that have a lot of confidential information. But if you're new to this kind of mail, or if you're getting into mail for the first time, you might not be used to this kind of rigorous accountability. It's important that if you're sending out things like financial information or medical information especially, that you have all the processes in place and that your crew's well trained before you take on this kind of work. It might be a disaster otherwise. Even some applications like direct marketing flyers or postcards, where in the past mailers might have been able to get by with more relaxed processes, are changing. Today, marketers are using information from their own databases and outside data sources to craft messages that are really meant for an audience of one. With the advances in computer software and digital printing equipment, and the narrowing price differences between monochrome and full color, marketers are able to create messaging and pieces that are much more valuable. It's really important that these get out the door and that none of those get left on the floor. In general, the more personalized pieces that you send out and the more confidential the information is, the more stringent your mail piece integrity procedures must be. Now, you don't necessarily have to implement a state-of-the-art tracking system right now today. I think you should have a plan of getting there someday. But there's certainly some jobs that can be adequately controlled with some fairly basic processes that you can implement today at little or no cost. Let's assume you're printing a standard marketing letter. Well, this is a pretty simple job. All the pieces have the same number of pages, they all weigh the same, they're all getting the same inserts. This is something that you can probably control adequately with some batch balancing procedures and some visual inspections. At a minimum, here's what I'd recommend you do for a job like this. First, make sure that all records are accounted for at every step of the way. Second, communicate all the materials to be used and the job setups and the balancing totals to be used. You can do this using a job jacket or a job folder that goes along with the job from station to station. Supervisors should look at the job setup at the beginning of the job and initial the transmittal that's in the job jacket. And at the end of the job, then the operator should balance and make sure that he initials the job jacket also. Inserter operators or clerks can fan through the finished mail to make sure that addresses are shown through the windows. And supervisors need to sign off on the job before it can ever leave the shop. Now you can probably think of other things that you could do, but you get the idea. Procedures like this are likely to catch most of the errors and allow you to correct them, and should one slip through, the impact is relatively small. So it's an appropriate set of procedures to use in a job like this. Now let's suppose that instead of doing marketing letters, you're doing variable page count trans-promo customer account statements. Well, this introduces a whole new set of challenges and plenty more opportunities to make mistakes. Plus, the risk factor has gone up. You actually have an opportunity to reveal confidential financial information to the wrong people. Added to the complexity and the higher risk, these documents are of higher value to the billers. It actually affects their cash flow. So this is an application that requires a hardier control solution. You're going to want intelligent inserters that can read barcodes that tell it how many pages go into each envelope and transmit some other integrity information. And you may want to have cameras on your printers and inserters so that you can do things like sequence checking to make sure that there are no pieces that have gotten missed. And if you're doing variable inserts as well, you may have to implement some control procedures to make sure that you got the right inserts loaded into the right insert feeding stations and that each envelope received the inserts that they were supposed to. So there's a lot more to this type of an application. Automated technology can be more thorough than the manual methods. The cameras can look at every single piece, but you shouldn't rely entirely upon them. Human eyes should still be on machinist setups, and you should still look at the finished pieces, and we recommend doing manual balancing in addition to those controls that you have through the technology. I've been in a few shops that had some Mailpiece tracking technologies that we felt were inadequate for the types of jobs they were running. In both cases, these were multiple page and variable page count statements. In one case, the client was running a job of over 10,000 pieces before they tried to balance. If they couldn't balance at the end of the job, then they had a crew that went through the finished envelopes and tried to locate the one that was double stuffed. If they couldn't find it in a certain period of time, then they would scrap the entire run, reprint, and reinsert. In another case, the shop was running the inserter with the envelope sealer turned off and doing offline metering. They were able to peek inside the envelopes to try and find the double stuffs that way and correct it. Now, in both these cases, the clients were able to find the mistakes. They weren't guilty of sending out a lot of errors out in the mail, but they took big productivity hits to be able to do it this way. So we recommended that they upgrade their shops and go to some more automated methods, particularly if they were interested in growing that business, because there was just no way they were going to be able to sustain that level of quality and accuracy if the volumes went up. The personalization, the value, and the complexity of documents going forward is only going to increase. Shops that can't deliver on 100% integrity are going to find it difficult to compete. Well, that's all for today. I hope I gave you some things to think about, some things you might be able to use in your own shop. As always, if you have questions about the material, just send me an email. I'd be happy to address those for you. mporter@printmailconsultants.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.